Hello YouTube. Today on The Naughty Librarian we are recapping Moonraker by Ian Fleming. Moonraker is a prime example of a book I love way more than its movie counterpoint. I'm just gonna say right now, Moonraker, the film, I hate it. It's my least favorite James Bond film, and you know what? That's even including Never Say Never Again from the 80s, which is an off-brand James Bond film, and it's also really bad. But Moonraker, worse. But the book version is really interesting, and it's nothing like the movie, thank goodness. Let's get into what actually happened in Moonraker, the book. We're gonna start off again with our yikes factor, because yikes, these books were written in the 50s. There is some yikes material in all of them. This one, its yikes factor is definitely sexism, misogyny. And Moonraker in particular, I think, is like shining an eye particularly on sexism, misogyny in the workplace. There's a running theme in the book about women either being married to a man or being married to their jobs. And any woman who chooses the latter is obviously wrong and hasn't met the right man yet. Therefore, we should all hit on her and wear her down until she just picks one of us. That's the theme here I'm getting for the women in the workplace. Yikes. Things were really bad in the 1950s for women. Like, you know what? Women couldn't even have their own bank account yet. Like, it was rough, okay? And I mean, even today, shit's still difficult, but I think this like theme of like, you know, sexism in the workplace is best shown through our heroine Gala. Gala is awesome. She's an incredible heroine. She's incredibly brave and intelligent. She's resourceful, and she's really good at her job. She's never like depicted as a damsel in distress. Like, she's a badass. And I like that Ian Fleming actually wrote her as a badass character. She's not ever going, oh James, I need you to save me. She's like coming up with solutions and executing them. Gala's dope. However, when Gala's like, you know, working in an office, she does always have this thought process running in the back of her mind, because she has to be aware of every little action she takes all day, every day, because these dudes around her are just waiting for her to either slip up, which proves that obviously women are inferior and shouldn't be in the workplace, or what happens if she smiles too long and then all of the dudes think she's fair game for sexual conquest. She has to like very much regulate how she responds to the world around her all day, every day. And surprisingly enough, that's how Ian Fleming writes her character. Like, she has POV chapters where she's talking about exactly how she has to behave around the men in the office place. And it's interesting for Ian Fleming to be writing that, because I think authorial, you know, intent does come into play here, where I really do think Ian Fleming is saying, like, sexism is stupid, right? Can y'all see how you guys kind of suck? Like, it's very obvious that he's on Gala's side. Like, Ian Fleming wrote a female character actively experiencing sexism relatively accurately. Like, I'm as shocked as you are. However, he really can't just stop objectifying women either. It's great that he thinks sexism is bad, but like, He describes bosoms a lot. Like, let's be real here. There's a yikes factor here for objectification of women. It's just how it is. That concludes our chapter on the yikes factor. Let's get into what actually happens in the plot of Moonraker. Moonraker takes place over the course of a normal work week, so Monday to Friday. It's only 5 days worth of time that's covered in this book. And the book starts off Monday morning. James, he's going about like an average day at the office. Like, not everything, you know, is car chases and shootouts with bad guys. Like, you also have to do paperwork sometimes. So he's just doing his boring like day job part of his job. And in fact, most of the time, that's what James is doing. You know, he's just sitting at his desk doing paperwork and reading reports and doing like normal office stuff. Like, he only goes on like maybe a couple missions a year. Most of the time, this is what he's doing. And we don't ever get to see it because it's not like the fun, exciting parts, but it's kind of reminding us that like, no, he's not just always jet setting around the world. He has to sit at a desk and do work like the rest of us. However, like, showing the monotony of his day-to-day routine and his lack of like meaningful relationships with women or friends or anybody. And James is honestly just not taking pleasure in anything considered fun. Any leisure activities or leisure activities with women. He doesn't really enjoy any of it. He's just doing it because it's something to do. And all of these things combined, it really goes to show James's isolation. You know, he looks and talks and acts like a real person, but he has no feelings on the inside. He's not really a person. He's just very good at masking. And honestly, it kind of feels like American Psycho, but without all the murder stuff. Well, not the psychotic murder stuff, just like the spy murder stuff here. But it feels like that, where like he's talking to people and existing and doing these fun things, but he's just not there. And all that James really lives for, the only thing that like makes him feel something, is the thrill of being on a case. And time is kind of running out for James in a way, because the Secret Service kind of has a hard out at 45 years old. You kind of go into retirement at that age. And James is 37. Like, he doesn't have a lot of time left. And, you know, he spends the monotony of his days just kind of thinking about that, going, wow, I only have 8 years left. Then what the fuck am I going to do for the rest of my life? I mean, realistically, it probably doesn't matter because there's no way I'm making it to 45. Like, these are the thoughts he has, probably for several chapters here. He's just kind of not there and just thinking about, like, what's the world actually like? I don't understand. But James is saved from all of these morbid musings when his phone rings, and it's the red phone, and that means there's a case afoot. So he picks it up and he goes to see M because M has a job for him. So M kind of puts James more on a personal mission. It's kind of off the books. It's not an official job, but he's like, James, I need your particular skills to do a solid for my friend. And the mission involves a new character named Hugo Drax. So TLDR backstory on Hugo Drax for a hot second here. So Drax was found at the end of World War II with amnesia and wearing an English military uniform and had an English accent. So they're like, oh, you must be English. They just send him back to England to recuperate. And eventually someone tells the doctor, he's like, oh, I know that guy. That's Hugo Drax. And he's like, yeah, I guess I'm Hugo Drax. Oh, my memories are coming back. And, he gets better and just gets discharged from the hospital. And he leaves England for 10 years, and he buys up a lot of mines, and he's really into metals he sells, and he's just become a billionaire. He has so much money. And then he comes back to England, and he just starts spending money all around town, which England's okay with. And in fact, he's even donated $10 million of his own money and his own manpower to build a big-ass rocket called the Moonraker. And this Moonraker is basically a first defense against aerial attacks. It's supposed to protect England, and he's considered this national hero because he's doing all this stuff out of the goodness of his heart. The problem here is that Drax cheats at cards, and it's weird, and M is suspicious of this. And M's been in this game for a long ass time. When M has a hunch about something, they're usually good hunches. So he's like, James, do you want to come to the club as my guest and keep an eye on Drax? Really, investigate, is he cheating? And if he is cheating, maybe kind of casually throw in hey, maybe you shouldn't be cheating. One of those type of missions. It's more of a friendly cut that shit out kind of mission rather than a I'm going to assassinate you kind of mission. Even though this isn't James's normal assignment, he still is good at listening and observing. And he does confirm that Drax is in fact cheating at cards. And James comes up with a plan to put the second part of this mission into action. So he's like, hey, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna enter into a bridge game. Mind you, they're playing bridge. That's the gambling they're doing, it's bridge. And M and James are just gonna out-cheat Hugo Drax. That's the whole point here. It's kind of like his job in Casino Royale, honestly. He's just going there to out-cheat the guy. Why not do it again? So they start putting this plan into motion. James, he's like being very obvious about drinking a lot of like alcohol, like, oh no, look at me, I'm drunk, I'm not a threat. Mind you, he drinks like 2 whole bottles of champagne throughout the course of the night by himself. Like, that is a lot of booze, frankly. But like, you know, James at this point is basically a functional alcoholic. He has a very high tolerance. And also, James, he's been like lacing his champagne with Benzedrine, which is speed. So basically he's just wide awake and super drunk. James and Em, they go to the table, they start the bridge game against Drax, and the whole time James, he's just kind of like biding his time with his champagne, and he's letting Drax win a whole lot just to get all cocky so James can just like lure him into his trap of cheating. And honestly, like, the trap that James sets is like the bridge equivalent of a bloodbath. Like, he just annihilates Drax in bridge, which is really weird to think of and say. After Drax loses a bunch of money, he's upset, obviously. He gets up and he's all, I'm angry. And he's like, all right, James, you won some money. I hope you spend it fast. You know, like a little threat on the way out. The whole thing is just tiny dick energy, and we're not living for it. But anyways, the plan was a success. You know, he's been ousted as a cheater, and, you know, maybe the cheating will stop, blah, blah, blah. A successful mission. So here we are, Tuesday morning, and James comes back into work on time, but looking worse for the wear. He did drink 2 whole bottles of champagne. He's not looking great. And luckily, he gets pulled out of this horrible day by another call on that red phone, which means there's another mission and Em is calling him to action. And apparently, last night during the bridge game, 2 people got killed at the Moonraker factory. One of the workers was the head of security, this guy named Talon, and the other was one of the workers. And apparently what had happened was, like, this worker guy, he walked up to Talon, like, at the bar after work, and he's like, I'm in love with Galibrand and no one can have her. And he shoots Talon and then shoots himself. And this is fishy for like a lot of reasons. One, you know, Talon was placed at the Moonraker factory specifically because he's very British and very loyal to the crown. He was part of, like, you know, special services, like the top force of the police. And he was placed there specifically because pretty much the entire workforce at the Moonraker factory are all post-war Germans. So, you know, there's a lot of paranoia there for obvious reasons. This is right after World War II. Also, Talon had called into headquarters that afternoon and said, like, hey, something's up, I'll make a report. And then he's killed before he could make a report. And then there's Galibrand, who, mind you, has no idea who the murderer was. She's not in any type of relationship with him. She's maybe talked to him one time ever. So she's like, I don't know who this guy is. And on top of that, Gala, she's actually undercover. She's part of the special services as well. She's a policewoman and she's undercover there, also to keep an eye on Hugo Drax. And on top of all of that shit, the Moonraker is scheduled for launch on Friday, which is like 3 days from now. So yikes, there's a lot of problems all in a very short amount of time. Since their inside man Talon is dead, they need someone to fill that position. So Em nominates James to go over there and be the new head of security at the Moonraker factory. So James, he stops by the police office and he gets like debriefed on what's been going on with the case. And he then just goes directly over to the Moonraker facility that evening. And, you know, he's greeted by Drax, and there's a couple of scientists with him and Galibrand. And they all have dinner, and like Drax is like showing him the facility and like the Moonraker itself and like getting really into the details and like how great everything is and how tight of a ship he runs. And, you know, James had a really shitty first impression of Drax, like, let's be real. However, after seeing Drax like be really competent at his job and like run a tight ship and be really intelligent about things, like James is like, maybe he's better than I thought. Like, maybe he's just awkward or weird and blowing off steam. Like, he's really conflicted about Drax because he has like all of this evidence that Drax is probably a bad guy, but there's no evidence to support this. So he doesn't really know what to think at this point. And of course, James sees Gala, who's like super hot. And he's like, oh, hello, Gala. Like, we should be friends. And Gala's like, you know what? I've got enough friends. I'm good. She just keeps turning him down. And James is just so confused by this. He's like, have you met me? Like, I'm handsome. How dare you not be interested in me? I don't understand how you could do that. It's really not one of James's finest moments in this book, but it's just pointing out the blatant misogyny that we were talking about earlier. But after that, James, he basically gets the whole like TLDR version of all of the science stuff and like the telemetry and rocket science involved in making the Moonraker. He learns also that it's Gala's job to kind of compile all the figures into a report every day for the telemetry of like the rocket, which is a big fucking deal. You have to have it land in the right place. But you know, as James like is getting filled in on who does what around here, he's also just looking around the base and like he starts seeing like suspicious stuff. He's like, that's weird. Like, for example, every single worker at the Moonraker facility has a shaved head and a full mustache. Every single one of them. There's not a single guy who doesn't have a buzz cut and a mustache. I'm surprised they didn't shave Gala's head and make her wear a fake one at this point. Like, it's everybody. And with that many mustaches all in one room, like, that has to be a red flag, right? Like, that's something weird. The only other suspicious thing James finds is this guy named Krebs, who's always around Drax, and he's like grade A creep. Like, the creepiest creep. Like, you see him and you're like, you're on a list somewhere. Like, that's Krebs. And he's like, I don't trust this guy. He's weird. Because Krebs has also been going through everyone's rooms and their papers and like digging in their drawers like a creep. Like, he's been going through Gala's room. He's obviously gone through James's room. Like, he's just being a weird little kitchen rat, like going through everybody's shit at night. And also, James is fairly certain at this point that Drax is actually the one telling Krebs to search all the rooms. Like, he's figured this out. He's put this together at least. But does that mean it's bad guy behavior, or is it like meticulous boss behavior? Because they're literally building a rocket ship. Like, a lot depends on this. Maybe he's just going overboard. So since that's all James really has to go on, he goes to Drax. He's like, hey, Drax, do you think Krebs is like a sneaky little snake? Like, do you think he's like up to something? So Drax is like, okay, I'll like talk to Krebs and stuff, but James, you should keep an eye on Krebs. Like, he's probably up to something here. And, oh, hey, why don't you and Gala like go out this afternoon and like Gala can show you around like the coastline where we are and the facility, and you guys can like become acquainted. Since there's really nothing James can do right now besides just sit there and speculate, he decides, all right, well, I'm gonna go out with Gala. And you know, they walk around like the beach and like she shows him like all the rock formations, and like they're actually having like a lovely time together. It's like a nice springtime stroll, and like there's flowers, and like James is like in his full-on charming mode right now. He can be very charming when he wants. And as they hang out together, James is kind of really taken with Gala. He actually has asked her questions about her life and gotten to know her, which is way more than he ever bothered to do with Solitaire and Live and Let Die. He's actually talking to Gala like she's a human. And James really likes her. He thinks she's really cool and smart and like good at her job. And like that ass though, she's still really hot. James, he talks Gala into taking like a little swim. It's a beautiful day, there's the beach, and like he's like, let's go swimming. Like, Gala, I give you my promise as a gentleman, I won't look while you change. Like, we'll both be in our underwear. That covers the same as bathing suits. Like, this is a swing. And again, James can be very charming, so Gala's like, okay, fine, let's go swimming. And they have a good time. They swim around, they're playing, I guess. And, you know, later on they get out of the water. They're just kind of laying on the beach, drying off in the sun very chastely. Like, James does leave at least 3 feet in between them. So they're just laying in the sun. And James, he's just like watching seagulls and like chilling. And then like the seagulls go crazy all of a sudden. And James is like, that's weird. And then he hears a big boom. And then all of a sudden the cliff face starts falling. And James is like, oh shit. So he kind of just like rolls on top of Gala. And like they're right up against the edge of the cliff. So, which saves their life because luckily all of the biggest boulders got shot forward in the fall and not on top of them. They just get covered by like much smaller boulders. So James is like protecting her. And then finally like shit settles down and James is luckily able to get enough leverage to push off some boulders. Mind you, he's very injured. He had a cliff fall on him. Like, he's very bruised and cut and normal injuries, but luckily nothing's broken. He helps Gala out of, like, you know, the rubble. And both of them are like, well, shit. There was no reason for that cliff to fall, and there was that big boom. So, wouldn't you know, someone just tried to kill us. They just tried to murder us with a fucking cliff. Like, what? That is supervillain behavior if I ever saw it. However, they don't know exactly who did it, so they're like, welp, all we can do at this point is just stay alive and try to figure out who wants us to be unalive. So they, you know, they get cleaned up in the ocean, and they take their like sweet ass time going back to the facility. They go to lunch at like a hotel, and then they eventually come back around like when they're like midway through dinner. James and Gala, they just strut on into the dining room while, you know, Krebs and Drax are just having a great old time at dinner. And when they see, you know, James and Gala walk in, both of them just white as a sheet because they're alive, and they're like, oh no. Like, they're very guilty at this point. And James kind of goes into like asshole mode right now because he just kind of like sitting down at the table, and he's like, oh, hey, Drax, you seem surprised to see us. Look at this. You didn't even put out a place for us. It's almost like you weren't expecting to see us at dinner. What's this about? And Drax is like, I'm going to bed. Like, leaves. I don't know. He doesn't really have a good answer for this. And again, there's nothing more James can do right now. So he goes to bed too. Gala goes to bed. They're all go to sleep. So now it's finally Thursday, and Drax, he has plans to go into London to meet with like some ministry people and stuff, and he's gonna be taking Krebs and Gala with him so they can go out into London and do whatever they need to do. And James is like, that's a good idea. You know what? I got shit to do in London too. I'll follow you in my car. And James and Gala make a plan to like spy on Drax and try to get some information or any kind of evidence, and then they're going to meet up for dinner. So they all leave, and Drax, true to his personality, drives like a lunatic. Just cutting in and out of traffic, just being an asshole, the whole 9 yards here. And Gala's like, you know, getting thrown around the car, and it gives her enough leverage, however, to bump into Drax enough to pick his pocket. And she's able to get like his little like notepad that has all the rocket telemetry in it. She just grabs it and she like shoves it in her pocket real quick, and she's like, Mr. Drax, I need to powder my nose. I'm sorry. And Drax is like, ugh, fine, go. And so he pulls over at the hotel. Gala, she runs into the hotel. She goes in the bathroom and she starts looking through the notebook, just like, what's in here? Is there any evidence we could use? And she notices there's 2 columns of figures on every page. One of them are her figures, the correct telemetry for the Moonraker, and then the other column is a new telemetry for the Moonraker that's about 90 degrees off from hers. And that's like super sus. Like, why would they need these extra numbers? So Gala's like, I think this is evidence. So she like carefully like whoosh, like rips out a page, folds it up really tiny, and like slips it in the finger of one of her gloves. So she's like, okay, I got evidence. I can bring it to James later. And she comes back out to the car, she gets in, and now comes the hard part. Gala has successfully picked Drax's pocket, but she needs to unpick it. She needs to be able to get this notebook back in his pocket. And she almost has it when Krebs in the back seat just jumps forward real quick and like snatches her hand. And he's like, she's a spy, boss. Have you seen? She's a spy. Just being a tattletaling little bitch. But you know, Gala's literally red-handed. She's holding his notebook. Like, it's obvious what she was doing here. And Drax is pissed about it. She's like, what the fuck? And she's like trying to come up with an excuse like, oh, I just really wanted to see it because I really am like so devoted to the Moonraker. I just want to make sure like all my numbers were right and like it was gonna go well, and like just kind of coming up with like silly girl reasons why she would have this notebook, which doesn't fly. They're like, no, we've determined you're a spy. So Krebs starts like fighting with her, and she's trying, you know, to escape, but you know, Krebs is in the back seat and able to like get her in this big chokehold. And eventually they just knock her over the head and she's unconscious. So sometime later, Gala wakes up and she's in this empty room in this empty house with Krebs and Drax, who are speaking fluent German to each other. And Gala just starts doing like the telemetry math in her head. Like, she is a smart lady. Like, oh my God, I can't even imagine that. Honestly, I really can't imagine what telemetry math is. I have no idea. So she's just like doing the math in her head and like trying to figure out like where 90 degrees off telemetry would have the rocket going. And then she realizes, oh no, the Moonraker isn't aimed at a unmanned spot in the North Sea. It's actually aimed toward the dead center of London, and there's a live atomic warhead on it, and it's supposed to launch tomorrow at noon. Well, fuck. Like, she's realized the real plot of the Moonraker here. They're gonna blow up London. So meanwhile, all this is going with Gala. James, he's sitting at the restaurant waiting for her to show up for dinner, and she's late. And he's like, this isn't like her. So he calls up like the police department, her boss, Valance, and he's like, hey, Valance, what's going on? Have you heard from Gala at all? Valance is like, nope, I'm worried as shit about her. She didn't call in, she didn't stop in like she was supposed to. I don't know what the fuck's going on, James. But you need to do whatever the hell it is you need to do to make sure Gala's okay. Like, I am worried as shit. Like, I am not okay, James. You need to fix this. And then Valance like tells him all he does know, which is like all of Drax's movements throughout the night. And the last place he was reported to be was that same gambling club from the beginning of the book. So James is like, all right, cool. I'm gonna do what I need to do. Don't worry about it. I'll fix it. So James, he gets in his car. He drives over to like the gambling club, and he's just staking it out, waiting for Drax to leave. Drax, he leaves the club. He gets in his car, and James, he starts like trailing him, and he sees that Drax goes over to this empty house, and then Krebs comes out of the house dragging a woman-sized sack along with him that they chuck in the back seat. And so James is like, this is suspicious. Oh my word. So James, he actually gets into some spy gear right now, which is really fun. Like, he has night vision goggles, and he also has like this windshield that's specialized where it can like drop down. So he can drive after Drax with no lights on, and he can just do whatever he wishes because he has night vision now. And then a high-speed chase ensues. They're like, you know, cutting through traffic and like trying to lose each other. It's like a whole thing. And it ends when Drax gets stopped by like this big truck, and it's full of like reams of newspaper print, and it's just blocking the road. So he's like, well, shit, I have an idea actually. Hey, Krebs, get up on the hood of the car, go cut some of those ropes holding those reams together. So Krebs does it. He hops back in the car. They like whoosh, swerve around the truck right as all those reams start falling, and James is, you know, coming around the bend. It doesn't end well for James. We'll just say that, because even if you have night vision, there's only so much you can do from a giant like 400-pound ream of paper coming at you. So James's car like flips a million times in the air, and like he's really injured from the crash. Obviously, like, he just flipped his car a whole bunch, and it didn't even have a windshield. Like, he's very injured. Drax is like, I made you crash your car, like a little schoolyard bully. And he's like, Krebs, go grab him, go get him, and go get his license plates. We're gonna take him back to the Moonraker base. And so Krebs, he grabs James, and he grabs his license plates, and they chuck him back in the back of the car. And Gala starts like kind of poking James as much as she can whilst in a sack. She's like, James, you need to wake up. And James finally kind of regains consciousness, and they can whisper to each other. It's loud in the car, but they can like whisper in each other's ears. And she like tells him what she found out. She's like, hey, the Moonraker's pointed at London, bro. We got an issue here. They get back to the Moonraker base, and they get drug into Drax's office and tied up. And Drax is like, hey, Krebs, why don't you grab the blowtorch? We're gonna torture you guys until we get the answers we want to know. Like, who are you working for? Krebs, get ready. It's gonna be your night tonight. Because Krebs is a creepy little creep who likes to torture people. Krebs is like, ha ha ha, and he has this like blowtorch. He's very excited. But James is not about to let, you know, Gala get blowtorch. So he's like, he just makes stuff up. So he's like, we both work for Scotland Yard, and no one knows where we are. Because if people knew where we are, they would have already shown up here. Like, we're alone, and don't worry about it. And Drax is like, oh, well, I guess that was easier than anticipated. All right, no blowtorch for you, Krebs. And Krebs is all upset because his toy got taken away. So while James's quick thinking has got them out of physical torture, it has not got them out of mental torture, because Drax, like any amazing supervillain, really loves to hear himself talk. So of course he needs to start telling him his whole life story and his dastardly plans. Like, this is like the cheesy James Bond stuff that we all know. We're like, why is he even telling the plot? Like, he could have just shot them both in the head and be done with this, but no, he needs to hear himself talk and like be told how smart he is. So TLDR for this, Drax, he's basically a Nazi and a high-ranking one at that. And he's real pissed off at Britain because Germany lost the war. He's like, I gotta stick it to these Brits. So he made his fortune in like Tangiers, and like, you know, everything was legal there in the 50s. Like, he's like, I was doing crazy stuff there. Like, you don't even know the wild evil shit I was doing to make millions, and nobody cared. Like, he's just going on about it. So he made all this money, and then after he makes all this money, he goes back to Germany, and he like looks up all his Nazi friends and like crabs with one of his like lieutenants, and he's like, hey guys, guess what? We gotta go to England, and we're gonna like build this rocket, and then we're gonna blow it up. Like, he's had this plan for a long time. And you may be wondering, hey, does Drax finally explain why literally everyone has a mustache? And yes, he does. All of the people working at the Moonraker facility are like Nazi war criminals. And apparently to let them legally come to Britain, they have to, pass a background check. And apparently shaving your head and growing a mustache is enough to disguise your identity to get into England. Literally, a bunch of Nazi war criminals grew mustaches, and the British government let them immigrate into the country. What? Like, that is just wild. Like, oh, I don't have words. The entire linchpin of this evil endeavor was mustaches all along. And Jamesy sits there and he has to listen to this whole long story because he's literally tied up. And after Drax is done talking, James can't help but to pick on him a bit because, like, fuck Nazis, right? James is like, yeah, cool story, loser. Why don't you go suck your thumb some more, you self-obsessed asshole. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. That's the gist of what James says. And Drax does not like this. So he gets really angry and he just starts like punching James a lot and he's beating him up until James is like pretending to be unconscious and he's like, I'm going to bed. Like, Drax leaves again. And Gala's like, oh my god, James, are you okay? Like, she just watched this guy get the snot beat out of him. And he's just like, hi, I'm not asleep. I'm actually happy. So James is just smiling at her with a mouthful of blood. So here's James's plan. Step 1, get the blowtorch. Because James, he wanted to get Drax pissed off enough that he would forget the blowtorch in the office, which he did. So James, he manages to get the blowtorch turned on with his teeth, and then he grabs it with his teeth, and James is able to burn through her restraint. Mind you, he's literally burning her with a blowtorch to get this restraint off. But Gala takes it like a champ. She's like, okay, cool, my hand's out. She uses a blowtorch, gets all the rest of the restraints off of them. So step 1 is complete. They're both free. Step 2, leisure time. They're in, Drax's private office, and it has like a private bathroom and all this stuff. It's like a fancy office space. So they both get cleaned up in the shower and, they're trying to put themselves back together because Gala's all beat up and so is James. And Gala like kisses James just for being so brave. And he did a lot of stuff just to come after her. So she's like, that's for being brave, essentially. Step 3 of the plan. James wants to put Gala in the shower and run the water full blast on her because step 4 is James going down into the fuel room underneath the Moonraker, which is like outside of Drax's office, and he's just gonna go in there and light a cigarette. Step 5 would be the Moonraker exploding and killing James instantly, but it would save England and hopefully Gala too because, she's behind blast doors and with the water on in the shower, so hopefully she'll survive, but it'll just incinerate James. Like, that's his big plan here. And considering James's mindset from the beginning of the book, he's already accepted he's not going to make it to retirement. So he's kind of just really resolved at this point. He's like, this is the best plan I can come up with. And at least like no one else is going to die and it'll be super quick. So it won't be that bad. He kind of has a real gallows humor to the whole thing. He's like, well, smoke him if you got him. Like one of those. So Gala, she looks him right in his stupid face and she's like, that is a shit plan. Come up with something better. Like, I don't know, for example, why don't we just go down into like where the gyroscopes are and correct the flight plan so the Moonraker will just land in the North Sea like it's supposed to, and that way none of us have to blow up right now. And James is just like, yep, okay, let's start working on your plan. That's way better than my plan. You're in charge. So they start coming up with a plan together. And step one is they have to like hide. So when Drax comes back to the office, he'll think they escaped. And then they both like climb up this ventilator shaft. And then like a few hours or whatever go by. And it's Friday morning at this point. And Drax and Krebs, they come into the office and they're expecting to find, two tied up people, but there's no one there. And they're like, oh no. So the good news is they believe that they escaped. The bad news is Hugo Drax isn't stupid. He's like, yeah, they're probably hiding in one of the ventilator shafts. Go grab like the steam hoses, shoot them up all the shafts. We'll figure out which one they're in when they start screaming. This is about to suck really bad for them because they're just gonna have to basically let the steam burn the shit out of them and not make any sound. There's just nothing to be done about it. It sucks, but that's the way it's gonna have to be. And so, they try to like minimize as much damage as possible, but they both get like pretty burned. And but they make it. They don't scream out and they both have some burns, but they survive. So Drax's plan didn't work out, so he's like, ugh, I don't know what to do. Krebs, let's go. Let's just go start the Moonraker launch. Like, I'm not dealing with this right now. So they leave. And James and Gala like painfully climb out of this ventilator shaft. So James and Gala painfully climb out of the ventilator shaft and they sneak out of the office and they get to like the gyro control room and they reset the telemetry on there so the rocket is officially launched in the right direction and no one's the wiser. And then they run back into Drax's office because they can't escape because there's guards everywhere. And the Moonraker is still going to launch. Their plan didn't stop the Moonraker from launching. It's still gonna launch, and they're like right next to it. They are way closer to a rocket being launched than any human should be. They're still in a pickle here, so they're just gonna do the best they can. So they're back to part of James's plan. They're gonna get in the shower and turn the water on full blast and hope for the best. They really don't have a better option at this point. Meanwhile, Drax, he's out with the press. He's giving an interview that's like really like kind of a suspect speech, and everyone's like, that's weird. Okay, back to the rocket. They're just like, okay, I guess he's a weird guy. And he starts the ignition sequence. So he starts it and he's like, all right, bye. And he runs away. He just runs off down to the beach. He gets into a submarine and takes off. So the rocket is launching, and mind you, they're not far away from it. All they have between them and the rocket is a blast door and a shower. Like it's bad. It's super incandescently loud. Like I don't even have a best adjective for that. Like how all-consuming loud it is and hot. And it's a lot to deal with, and they're both like not handling it well because a freaking rocket is being launched next to them. But surprisingly enough, it works. Like these are some grade A blast doors because they survive. But anyways, the Moonraker is in flight, and the BBC is like reporting on it and stuff. And then there's like this naval ship out there in the ocean to watch it as well. And the submarine is there, and it's like going super fast and being weird. And they're like, hey, submarine, what you doing? Why are you heading towards the point where like the Moonraker's gonna fall? You're gonna get hurt. And then like they don't respond, and the submarine starts revealing its origin as a Russian submarine. So the Moonraker, boom, it hits the target, which also happened to be the submarine because it went over to the coordinates where the Moonraker was supposed to land. So they just set it up perfectly that they got hit by their own rocket. but the rocket, you know, it explodes on impact like it's supposed to, and there's a nuclear warhead in it, so there's a lot happening right now, and like there's a naval carrier near it, which is also a problem because they're very close to a nuclear explosion. And the BBC was reporting on it. This was a big deal. Like a lot of people saw this thing land and explode into a mushroom cloud, and not to mention that naval boat that the BBC reporter was on. Like there's a lot of shit going down right now. Like that boat didn't survive the explosion. Like 200 people died on that naval carrier. The shitstorm is big on this one, and the government kind of just does what it does best and sweeps the whole thing under the rug. Because they have to. They can't just tell the world, whoopsie, we almost let a Nazi war criminal blow us up. Our bad. Like they're in trouble either way. So in the aftermath, James, he's back at work, you know, after going to the hospital for all of his burns and bruises and cuts and etc. And he's with M, he's being debriefed again. A lot of people saw James and Gala get carried out of like the facility on stretchers. So like their cover's already a little bit blown at this point. Like a lot of people saw them. So they're like, hey, James and Gala, get the fuck out the country. Here, spend as much money as you want. Unlimited money. Go somewhere for a month. You deserve it. This is your reward. And also, too many people have seen your face. We gotta let this like die down. And James is like, ooh, like I never turned down a vacation. So he's kind of excited about it. He's like, ooh, and I'm gonna get to spend time with Gala. Like he really likes Gala. He thinks she's awesome. Like they just saved the world together and he didn't have to save her in the process. She's dope. James, he's like thinking about all these fun things they're gonna do on vacation, and he's like excited, and he's like, have I caught feelings for Gala? What's going on here? I don't understand feelings. He's all starts thinking this. He's like, well, maybe I really like Gala. Like, I'm gonna give this a go. He starts getting very happy and excited, and he starts like getting the human emotions back. And this is like something he's excited for, because we've set up already in the beginning of the book how he doesn't experience joy in anything anymore. And then Gala's here and he experiences joy again. James and Gala, they meet up for dinner, and you know, James is all excited and he's like, Gala, what are your plans for tomorrow night? Because like, I've been coming up with some great plans. And then he notices that Gala is just kind of looking over his shoulder like that. And so he turns around and he sees this young man standing like, you know, 20 feet away. He turns back around and Gala looks him right in the face, and she says she's getting married to that man tomorrow. And this was not what James was expecting to hear. Like, she had been wearing an engagement ring the whole time, but he thought it was just so like men would leave her alone in the office place because men are assholes. Like, he's experienced this. So he's like, oh, like, why on earth would I think she would like me? All we did was have one kiss and trauma bond. And he feels like a lot of emotions right now. He feels kind of embarrassed because, you know, he thought like they really had something when they didn't. And also he's really kind of heartbroken because he knows just how special Gala really is. Ultimately, James can't bring himself to make her feel bad about having a boyfriend and not being able to go off with him. So James, he decides he's just going to be the man that she needs him to be right now, which is essentially not a human being with all these feelings and emotions. She needs him to be the silhouette, like the man who isn't bothered by this. So he just kind of puts on that mask again. So he's just like, oh, that's too bad. Like, I had a great like tour of France planned and stuff, but it's okay, whatever. And, you know, Gala, I think she also knows that he's putting on this face for her, but she's also grateful for it. So, you know, they just shake hands and then they just part ways forever. They just go on into each other's separate lives. So the book ends on this very bittersweet note of James, you know, wondering what could have been. Like, maybe this was like my key to finding my, you know, humanity that he's always searching for in all these books. But ultimately he doesn't get the girl, which is like the rare thing in a James Bond book, because he's always the guy who gets the girl in the end. He's like the hero, the suave guy, and he doesn't get the girl. And probably it's for the best. And he even acknowledges this. Like, he's like, you know, I don't have enough to give her. Like, I'm barely a person. Hi, everybody. This is a little quick insert from editing Amanda right now, because I can't believe I forgot to mention the main point of this ending of the book, because James not getting the girl at the end of this book that's basically been examining sexism and misogyny makes a lot of sense, because it's kind of proving the point that women aren't things that you can win. She either wants to be with you or she doesn't, and she's not like this prize that you get for completing the mission. She's a person. So I also like that he doesn't get the girl, because it kind of proves the point that they were trying to make the whole book, that sexism is bad and women aren't objects. So anyways, back to the video. I had to throw that in because like I couldn't believe I didn't film it originally. So that was officially Moonraker by Ian Fleming. I really enjoyed it. I will say, if you're going to read this, just beware. The first half of this book is fairly boring. Not a lot really goes on, but the second half is really good. There's so much action, and like it's a real spy thriller. They're looking for clues and trying to solve a mystery and like stop the bad guy. Fewer action sequences, I would say, in this as well, because this is more scientific and like thought-based rather than action-based. And also the world isn't saved with James using brute force, it's saved by Gala using her brain. So I think it's a really good contrast for a lot of the James Bond books, because this one has such a different vibe to it. So overall, I very much like this book, and it is surprising that Ian Fleming wrote a female character who's badass and awesome and also experiences sexism and shows how that's wrong. I'm as surprised as everybody else here. So overall, I think this has a lot to offer, and it's really interesting. It's not as exciting as the other books because there's less action. Really, it's a book about introspection and also, you know, a moody book about feelings and also spy thriller. On that note, let me know in the comments down below, what was another book you read that had like a bittersweet ending that you thought was really good? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like. If you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe. And if you want cool exclusive content, including early access to videos and a book club, you can consider becoming a channel member or a patron. Links for that are in the description down below. And on that note, I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.